In this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayera, the pasuk says, "Va'Avraham v'Sarah zekenim ba'im bayamim." Avraham and Sarah were old, ba'im bayamim. They were coming on in days, which seemingly is a very strange way to write. The Torah could have just said that they're old. What's this idea, this lashon of ba'im bayamim, coming on or coming along in days? In fact, we find the same kind of lashon in next week's parsha, Parshas Chayei Sarah. The pasuk says, "Va'Avraham zaken," and Avraham was old. Bayamim, coming in days. Same idea, ba'im bayamim. The Zohar says, and it translates, bayamim means he was coming with his days. You could translate it coming in his days or coming with his days. So the Zohar says that Avraham and Sarah, the Torah over here is telling us, is of course they're old. Many people are old. But Avraham and Sarah, they came in their old age with all their days, all the days of their life. Every single day of their life had value, had meaning, had purpose, and none of them were wasted. None of them were regretful days. And that's how you learn the pasuk. Zekenim, Avram and Sarah were old, ba'im bayamim. They came into their old age with all of their days. Now, this is seemingly difficult to understand because we know the story of Avraham. He did not grow up knowing about Hashem, serving Hashem. He grew up surrounded by Avodah Zarah. In fact, when he was younger, the Medrash clearly says, when he was younger, he served Avodah Zarah. And it was only through his own process and his own life and his own work that he came to realize that there's only one God in this world, that he began to serve Hashem. In fact, there is a three-way machlekes. There are three different opinions as to when did Avraham realize that there's only one God in this world and he started to serve Hashem. The Gemara says that Avraham Avinu was 3 years old. However, the Medrash brings two other opinions. One age that the Medrash says is he was 40 years old, and the third age is the Medrash Rabbah brings down says Avram Avinu was 48 years old. So whether Avram Avinu was 3, 40, or 48, in fact, there are those. It's a separate topic and separate conversation, but there are those who want to say that these three separate opinions are not really arguing, but rather they're various stages in the process and development and in the growth of Avraham Avinu in terms of his hakara, his recognition of Hashem, and that the fact that this world was created only by one God. The whole concept of monotheism was something that Avraham Avinu introduced to the world. Until then, there was many different gods. There was the god of the wind and the god of the rain and the god of the sun, and paganism was rampant. And Avraham Avinu introduced this novel concept that the whole world was created and is guided and directed by one ultimate divine being, which is Hashem. But regardless of how we understand whether he was 3 years old, 40 years old, or 48 years old, clearly there were days in Avram Avinu's life that was not dedicated to the service of Hashem, where he served Avodah Zarah, and he was not yet on the level of Avram Avinu like we know it. So how can the Zohar, or how do we understand when the Zohar says, Boyim Bayamim, that Avram Avinu and Sarah came in their old age with all of their days, every one of the days of their life was precious, was meaningful, was worthy, and was valuable. There were days, years, and even decades that clearly we're not proud of and clearly we don't want to recognize. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says a beautiful, very important and vital lesson that in the process of life, we go through difficult times, and in the process of growth, we go through challenges. And people have days, months, and sometimes even years where things are cloudy, where things are challenging, where things are not clear. And perhaps we stumble, and perhaps we fail, and perhaps we fall, and we're not proud of it. And the tendency is we want to forget about it. We want to make believe like it never happened. And we judge ourselves, and we think that those days are mistaken. Those periods of our life we want to erase and eradicate. Says the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that's what the Zohar is telling us. Avram Avinu, sure there were days or years or maybe even decades when he wasn't the Avram Avinu that we knew. But how did he become Avram Avinu? He became Avram Avinu by going through his process, by going through his growth, by starting off where he started and struggling through that process and thinking and being honest with himself and reviewing and saying, is this true for me? Is this not true for me? That which I'm growing up in in the environment, in the atmosphere that I'm growing up, and going back and forth in that confusing process until he came to a clarity. And another thing became clear, another thing became clear. And he started to change and he started to grow and started to develop until he established this relationship with one divine being. And then after he himself grew, he started to share that with others at a tremendous risk of his own life. But it was a process, it didn't happen over one day. And it was a process that went through darkness, it went through struggle, it went through challenge, it went through confusion. It went through times and periods and phases of his life that perhaps you would think we don't want to talk about. We don't want to acknowledge. Let's forget about those days. That's not such a good yichus to remember that Avram Avinu wasn't always the Avram Avinu that we know. Says the Zohar, says the Torah, no. Bo'im ba'yamim. Every one of Avram Avinu's days was precious and had meaning. You know what had meaning? Because that's why he became Avram Avinu. That's how he grew. That's where he got his greatness. The path to greatness is through struggle. The path to light is through darkness. The path to peace is through pain. We have this concept, this idea, which is really a lie. We have this idea that we're supposed to always be in a perfect state. We're always supposed to be in our A game. We're always supposed to be in our highest level of fitness, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. The idea of struggle is something that's taboo. We're not talk about. It's almost like it's shameful. Like there's something wrong with me. There's something missing and lacking in me if I'm going through a dark period. It could be in relationships. It could be in finances. It could be in Yiddishkeit. There's so many areas. It could be emotionally. Somehow, we're never supposed to struggle. We're never supposed to have difficulties. And if I do, I'm not talking about it. It's something I want to erase. It's something I want to hide. It's something I want to ignore and make believe it's not there because I'm supposed to always be in a perfect state. But that's not what the Torah tells us. Avram Avinu wasn't always Avram Avinu. For many, 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 many years he struggled. And he went through that process. So first of all, the Torah is telling us you could talk about it. There's nothing to be ashamed of. But you know why? Because it's lechatchila. It's not a b'di'evad. How do we grow? The soil in which greatness grows and develops and blossoms is in the soil of pain. It's in the soil of challenge. It's in the soil of struggle. That's how we grow. That's how we attain greatness. That's how our inner beauty is revealed to the world. That's the path. Someone who never has a bad day, he's not in the ball game. Someone's having a hard day, amazing. You know why it's amazing? Because you're in the arena called life. Life is messy. It's meant to be messy because it's through the growth, it's through the struggling, through the trial and error. Try this way, try again that way. Whether again, it could be in so many areas. It could be in Amunah, it could be in faith, it could be in midas, it could be in relationships. If a person has a garment, imagine a person buys a coat from a department store, very expensive coat, beautiful coat. And then unfortunately, there's a rip in the coat. And this beautiful pattern, this beautiful material got ruined. The person then goes ahead and brings it to an expert seamstress. And the seamstress weaves it together and mends the rip that was in this cloth. If you hold up this cloth now, this coat, what's the strongest part of the coat? It's the part that had the rip. Because that part, even though it had a rip, was rewoven together, was strengthened despite the rip. And that's true in all aspects of our life. Whether we have to mend a relationship between me and myself, between me and my spouse, between me and someone else, or between me and Hashem. How does my relationship get stronger? Through the struggle, through the rips. Ba'im bayamim. When we're going through dark times, or we're going through challenges, or we're going through confusing times, and we all have those. Don't despair. It's not b'di'evet, it's l'chatchila. We're on the right path. We don't see the right path. It doesn't feel like it. It doesn't seem like it. But this is the right path. There is no other way. There's no shortcut. A seed, in order for it to grow, has to first decompose and first rot so that new life could be born. If we feel like we're disintegrating, as long as we have a growth mindset and we're trying to elevate ourselves, embrace and celebrate the mess, because life is meant to be a mess. That's the way to growth. It's the pathway. It's the only way to get to where we want to get to. Every Friday night, when we say l'chadaidi, at the end of l'chadaidi, we turn around, Rabbi B'Shalom, and we face the back. And there are different reasons given for the minute that we turn around and we face the back of the shul. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen says a beautiful idea of why we turn around. All 6 days of the week, we're engaged in mundane work, earning a living, being busy with mundane, uninspiring, worldly pursuits. It's hard to feel, it's hard to think clearly. Then comes Shabbos, the day where we elevate ourselves, where we separate ourselves from the physical world, from the mundane world, where we could focus on more connection to our family, connection to Hashem, connection to ourselves and our neshama, and have a certain level of clarity and peace. And at what point do we usher in this special time? By l'chadaidi, by Kabbalah Shabbos. So you think that we want to forget the difficulties of the previous 6 days. The 6 days of struggle, the 6 days of confusion, the 6 days of pain. And just focus on the Yom Shekulei Shabbos that's Me'ein Olam Haba, that's full of peace and joy. No. Just at that moment, we're going to turn around and we're going to look back. What are we looking back toward? We're looking back toward the past 6 days that we just came from. Why? Because we're telling the 6 days that we just left, I'm not forgetting you. Not only am I not forgetting you, the only reason I could come to Shabbos, the only reason I could come to the peace, the transition of the elevation of beauty of Shabbos is davka through the 6 days of struggle, through the 6 days of work. So thank you, 6 days. I'm not forgetting about you. I'm not ashamed of you. I'm embracing you and thanking you and facing you. And when I do that, now I can turn around. And now I could be bo'im bayamim, coming with all my days. So yes, life is a mess. But it's supposed to be a mess. Love your mess.